In the soup.
We're gonna go basic on a very
Hey y'all, Scott here. Please, for the love of God, don't mind me. I'm just doing some touch-ups to my high school yearbook photo. You think they'd let me do retakes 9 years later? There's gotta be a grace period. I've been having trouble going to sleep thinking about what people thought of me back then, so hopefully this will change their minds. Okay, and we're done! I actually toned it down, I didn't want to get too late. Telling the truth. What are you, a bitch? Well, be honest about how your video game looks when you can just lie and deal with it when it's already bought. False advertising is how many companies roll. We've all seen those fast food comparison shots. This is what's advertised, and this is what I got. What the hell? Most of the time for marketing, you'll use something that represents the final product, but you do some color correction, adjust the lighting, tweak a few angles here and there, boom, good enough for error. And when it comes to video games, they are no stranger to catfishing. Why show actual gameplay in your ad when you can show something that's neither a game nor being played? And it's way easier to disappoint players than to entice them with the truth. No matter what, false advertising is always gonna stick with gaming. It's been there since the very start and it will be there till the very end in 4 months. Advertisers know they could just show you what the actual game is gonna be like, or they could visualize what it will feel like.
Garbage.
Sometimes advertisements don't necessarily lie, but with the way they're set up, you come in with certain expectations. With the Mario Galaxy commercials and box art, I thought you could fly through space just like this to each of the galaxies. Instead, they just play a cutscene of Mario flying, and when you were flying in game, it would mostly just be an automated thing going from one place to another. You did get a power-up late in the game, the Red Star, and that let you freely fly for a decent amount of time, but it was only in one level and the hub world. I wanted to cream through space to all these levels like how this looked. And Super Mario Galaxy just ended up being my favorite game of all time. I'll take the single tier. This is kind of the mentality of a lot of old school box art. Box art in general is supposed to be an artistic representation of the game you're buying. Of course it shouldn't lie, but if you're waiting for an exact moment in the game to look just like the box art, well, that's a toughie. I don't think this ever happened in Title Legends. Obviously, these take and hyperbolize the best and most defining moments of the game to make for a great and appealing piece of art that also isn't misleading, which is a difficult thing to balance. Atari thought we were idiots. This isn't misleading because under the right mindset, the game will make you feel like this. So eating soap. You thought we were past this level of deception? Oh, no. See, many have noticed how box art has become more in line with what we expect out of our games these days, but the angst behind the Atari box art lives on in the form of trailers. We could show the product and get people excited, or we could not show the product and get people excited and pissed eventually. Hey, sometimes you just have to show something. And if that something isn't enough, America's biggest fear becomes a reality. The gamers will revolt. So it's obviously enticing to make your game look as appealing as possible in your big reveal trailer. It's okay to use a few scenes not actually in the game. Maybe put some CGI there for the sake of cinema. Maybe put that in. It's not in the game, but we can make it happen in the game, right? This is how legends are born. Dead Island is one of my go-to picks for deceiving trailers, and it's one of the best ones of all time. This incredible, emotional, 3-minute long cinematic masterpiece showing a family being attacked and losing their lives to a zombie outbreak, all played in reverse. There's so much you can analyze with this trailer. It put Dead Island on the map for so many players. This trailer was the first time I had even heard of the game. It really set the title up to be a gripping, emotional story of a zombie apocalypse and the emotional turmoil that ensues because of it. Here's the first thing you see putting the disc in.
Shrunken head, broken legs, body parts on the concrete.
Not saying Dead Island is a bad game at all, but the trailer and the game are two completely different beasts. The tone in the game is still fairly serious, but not as serious or emotionally gripping as the trailer would lead you to believe. These characters have nothing to do with the game, other than showing remnants of the outbreak as it first occurred on the island. The developer Techland even went into the game after the trailer came out to try to adjust the tone as much as possible to be more in line with it. But these still feel like two different things. It just shows how powerful marketing can be, making you want something you had no prior interest in. But this was a case of false advertising just because we let somebody talented make our trailer. Oops. Sometimes false advertising is very much deliberate as it sets you up for a massive shock while playing the game. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a prime example, as you think you'll just play as Snake the whole game. Nah, you're playing the rest of the game as this new character, Raiden. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Well, with the title literally involving the word remake, it sets you up to expect the story to basically follow the same steps as the original. Also, the entirety of the original. In reality, This was a fucking lie. The Last of Us Part 2, on top of pulling the same Metal Gear Solid joke of, you thought you were playing as this character? Laugh. They also altered certain cutscenes for its trailers to make the character Joel look older in them, so that way, with viewers knowing he's aged, they were led to believe he was in more of the game than he really was, when in reality, they altered flashback scenes, made him look older, and put them in the trailer. See, I don't really consider that to be false advertising, at least in the more negative sense. Rather, it's leading players in another direction, or just not showing things to avoid spoilers. So it's just being an ass. But then we have just the flat-out lies. Some of the most despicable, loathsome moments in the video game industry. The Simpsons game. This game had the audacity to say in its E3 2007 trailer it was releasing on every platform ever made.
Coming this fall to every platform ever made.
Wow, even the PSP? See, most people would assume that's a joke, but you forget to take into consideration most people. Some people genuinely thought this game was coming to all these platforms, so we had to re-release the trailer. The voiceover was the same, but the platforms showcased were... true. Well, I said it was ridiculous for anybody to assume the original trailer wasn't a joke. I think some of the platform choices were incredibly misleading. The Game Boy Advance and GameCube were still being supported at this time, so out of all platforms to put there as a joke, those are really odd choices considering I don't think it was too far-fetched to expect a Game Boy Advance or GameCube version in 2007. Or the VIC-20. The box itself can be pretty deceitful sometimes. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on Wii U says it supports the Wii Remote and Nunchuck and Classic Controller and lying. This was just a misprint, but there was speculation in the early days of Breath of the Wild's development that it would allow players to use motion controls like with Skyward Sword on the Wii. Now, supporting one Wii Remote by itself, I think only the bravest speculated that. Doom on Sega Saturn says on the box that it's the original Doom in all of its glory when it's missing content. But then we have the flat-out disappointments, where you watch a Fruit Gushers commercial as a kid, and in those, whenever somebody ate one, their entire head would turn into a giant fruit, so you never ate one for years out of fear, and one day you decided life is hell anyways. Son of a bitch. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Oh, this collector's edition comes with stones. I swear to God if they're just eggs. Not again. These have all been somewhat tolerable lies, though. I mean, if she's cheating on you, at least she's only doing it a little. Aliens Colonial Marines was such a massive cluster of garbage. Like, what the hell happened here? Gameplay demos shown were severely different from the final product, making the game look so much more sophisticated with good lighting, AI, animations, a severe attention to detail. But upon release, we only have a few options here. See, this was a massive downgrade, some areas of the game more so than others, but in the end, this was pure deceptive marketing. At E3 2012, the game was running on very specific work machines. This wasn't going to work on the consoles at the time, but they made it still not work. While it's not unplayable, Colonial Marines was a huge disappointment and showcases how companies will pretty up a game for major gameplay demos to end up releasing something not nearly as groundbreaking. It's crazy how far these studios will go to mask a title's true identity, which, to be fair, I'm sure they wanted Aliens to end up looking like this. The intention definitely wasn't to win everybody over at E3 and then release shit. These gameplay demos are supposed to represent what they want the game to be, and if it actually turns out that way, well, let's pray God's a fan. I mean, this demo looks like a fine-tuned PS4 Xbox One game, not a 360 title. But even then, the graphical downgrade isn't merely due to the consoles. It affected the PC version as well, and overall, everything was just of lower quality. It tricked millions into buying the game, thinking it would be this, when in reality, it was nothing but a shell of that. Watch Dogs suffered a similar, though not a severe fate, where it too looked light years better via the gameplay demo than in its final state. This was definitely because it was revealed quite early in the project's life. They didn't have to take hardware limitations into account nearly as much at this time compared to when you're finalizing everything about the game. And when it got to that point, I mean, the game still looks fine, but that E3 gameplay demo was beyond impressive. Watch Dogs at release was a somewhat buggy, generic, modern Ubisoft game, and not much more than that. No Man's Sky was a huge letdown for many, with the promise of basically having an infinite amount of worlds to travel to in space. Of course, the ones they decided to showcase at E3 were the only ones of note. The game was supposed to feature procedurally generated worlds, and when you would land on one, it was truly you discovering it, but in reality, the game launched as a boring experience where there was nothing to do, and the worlds weren't impressive. They didn't look as graphically decent as they did during the marketing push, and they all just felt like variations of each other, nothing of note. Now, Watch Dogs wasn't the biggest downgrade. It was still a decent game, and No Man's Sky got a ton of updates, and at this point, it's pretty okay and does a better job living up to what was initially promised. Aliens was one of the worst cases of this. deliberately making a better looking gameplay demo before release, and gameplay demos are supposed to be more trustworthy than trailers. That's the point of them. The trailers use CG cutscenes and cuts between them and gameplay all the time. The gameplay demo is supposed to show you what you're gonna get, because trailers can be incredibly misleading. The Killzone 2 trailer infamously was all CGI, even though it was animated in a way to make the viewers think it was all gameplay. See, this was right before the PlayStation 3 was coming out, and that was a time when we thought anything was possible on these consoles. If anybody could resurrect Christ, it would be the PS3. So many assumed they weren't lying. This was gameplay. Now, Killzone 2 still looked quite good when it released, but the people who made this trailer, they're still going to hell. Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2009 on Wii. The commercial used Xbox 360 footage of the game with a Wii Remote pointer. How did they think that would fly? EA explained the Wii footage wouldn't look good on a TV, so they used the HD footage from the 360 version and put the Wii Remote pointer in there, and bam, that's a sin. But one game decided to do something innovative. Be the biggest example of false advertising of all time. Yeah, I'm not really saying anything that hasn't already been said here. Smallpox. They fucking stink. But when talking about false advertising in gaming, we can't avoid the piss stain on my Xbox collection. Cyberpunk 2077 was developed by CD Projekt Red, a developer highly regarded for their work on the Witcher series and their commitment to consumer-friendly practices. I mean, The Witcher 3 was a huge hit, but even before that release, they announced they'd be working on a game based on the Cyberpunk series of tabletop RPGs. This was in 1964. Announced in 2012, then getting its first trailer in 2013, and then its next trailer 5 years later. In reality, the game was nowhere near starting full-on development, and it took until The Witcher 3's final expansion released in 2016 for the team to actually start work, and when this gameplay demo was fully revealed in 2018, jaws were dropped. This was such a detailed world with people walking around who have legitimate lives to live. If you would follow just one around, you would see them go about their day, go to their job, go home, and every single decision of yours would come back to bite you in the ass. And this is all without saying, the game looked stunning. Just absolutely beautiful models and settings. The animations were amazing. It looked like the most advanced video game of all time. And guess what? After being delayed numerous times, Cyberpunk launched in a state that, well, the main issue stemmed from the console versions. The PC version looked, ran, and worked the best, but it still was a far cry from that initial gameplay reveal. Most of the issues boiled down to how glitchy and unpolished the game could be at times, but at its core, I'll stand by the fact it's a good game. The world is really what sells it. It's so detailed and feels like a genuine lived-in place, and being in a dystopian future, it's truly a world worth exploring and looking at every little minute thing. But everything around it just doesn't feel all too special. The gameplay isn't anything groundbreaking. It's a first-person open-world RPG involving shooting and driving segments, and none of this is bad, but it just isn't anything I haven't seen before. Anything that they talked about in the gameplay demo, like how advanced the non-playable characters are, you just see them walking in a circle, going up to them and hitting the talk button, and they say one of like 3 repeated phrases to you. The same goes for the characters more integral to the story. They'll repeat some voice lines, which is fine, that's understandable. But this isn't the genre-defining game they made it out to be. It's a brilliantly designed world inside a game that feels like it's from 2013. Glitches were abundant, and we're just talking about the PC version here. On Xbox One and PlayStation 4, not only were glitches even more all over the place, but the game ran like piss, and that doesn't run well. Choppy frame rates, low resolution, the game would freeze and crash constantly, and this was the product of a giant marketing campaign pushed by investors and higher-ups who didn't understand how game development worked. They wanted a 2020 release date, which by the time CD Projekt Red started development would have given them less time to finish than The Witcher 3. And this project was so much more advanced with elements they've never worked with before. It just felt like a lot of choices they made didn't add up. Like, why do we have all this customization for our character, but the game is almost exclusively played in the first person and you barely ever see your character? Why push all this money into marketing and showing a demo of a game that frankly didn't exist yet? Much like other examples given, this demo was basically what the developers were told to shoot for, not what the game was, and no matter how much the developers said they needed more time or this wasn't possible, the marketing pushed Cyberpunk that much more. Did they really have to announce, hey, the game is finished, when the developer said, bullshit it is? Cyberpunk 2077 is a good game. Be for everybody, but to act like at its core this isn't a well-crafted experience, I think is a bit much. But you can't blame people for thinking that after such a disastrous launch and being lied to constantly. This was a case of a developer who was known for their goodwill and how players adored them, and higher-ups taking advantage of that. It's crazy to me how much these companies feel the need to lie when they know that it'll just come back to bite them in the ass. They take first impressions more seriously than launch impressions sometimes, but is it really worth all the headaches? To go through lawsuits and refunds and to lose consumer trust, all all to impress people at E3 with something you know damn well can't be accomplished? Well, for some people it is. That's why lying is so popular. Fix a problem now, deal with the repercussions later, instead of telling the truth and causing some potential disappointment, but then you don't have to deal with bigger problems a year from now. It's just sometimes marketing takes over projects, and a lot of marketers don't care. Their job is to get people interested, and even if it turns out to be over lies, well, that's more publicity for the project. I guarantee you, more people have talked about Cyberpunk and Aliens Colonial Marines and No Man's Sky because they were disasters compared to if they were as good as they were made out to be. And if regardless of if discussion is positive or negative, it's still getting the name out there, which means false advertising for games will never go away. Game studios are constantly pressured into pushing boundaries, and I feel like they look at what they're currently capable of, no matter how advanced, and think it's not good enough. So they pretty things up for reveals and just assume they'll get it working later. But as we can see, that's not the greatest risk to take. I think the lesson to be learned here is it's okay to be excited. It's also okay to be skeptical, but maybe wait to make a full decision until something's out in the world and actual people are playing the game rather than snake people. Because liars are everywhere. They might even be staring you in the face. Hey y'all, Scott here. One man's trash is another man's f***ing garbage. What makes a video game a good deal? Well, it's subjective. I don't know why you wrote Big Fangs, but I can't say you're wrong. But it's good to know your limits, what the bare minimum kind of product you buy at a certain price is. If I'm gonna buy a game for $70, well, it's gotta have this, or I'm not budging. But many don't seem to understand how just because they won't buy anything with the letter B in it, that doesn't mean I abide by their logic. Either way, I'm safe. It's entirely up to each individual how they spend their money. If you want to buy The Last of Us Part 1 on PlayStation 5, yeah, I mean, there's worse ways to spend $70. Here, take my money. So then what do I consider good deals and bad deals in gaming? Well, to truly understand, we need examples. If we don't get examples, we'll make examples. After over a decade of $60 being the norm for the standard blockbuster video game, with the introduction of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, we saw that price increase by $10. Oh no, my Gordita crunch money! Hey, listen, I ain't opposed to $70 video games. How much time you get out of these things, that's still a fine value. It cost me $15 to see Dumbo, and I still haven't made back that investment. But the games they chose to be some of the first with that standardized price, it's the same goat I've seen every day for a nickel. I'll give them 9,000 today. You'd expect games like Forza Horizon 5, Resident Evil Village, Guardians of the Galaxy, Elden Ring to maybe be $70, but no. Demon's Souls, a remake of a PlayStation 3 game from 2009 that launched at $60, a part of the same lineup of games from the same developers, Elden Ring, which retailed at $60. Oh, I'm sorry, the chef is out. He made all the sense around here. Again, $70 games, I'm fine with. I mean, have you seen the prices of games from the 90s? Mortal Kombat Trilogy on Nintendo 64 was $75, and you know why they went lower? The cash register can't hold that much money. Well, game prices were the way they were back then due to how much technology had to be crammed into these game cartridges, many of which had unique hardware included in order to achieve maximum here you go. So, yeah, when you have to specially produce chips to put inside each and every game, that'll drive up the cost. Though with the transition to discs, those you didn't have to do that with. Just order a pack of blank CDs from Big Lots and you're set. Those were cheaper to mass produce, thus games got a fairly standardized price during the PlayStation 2 days of 50 bones. That increased to 60 with the Xbox 360 era, and moving into the PlayStation 5 generation, now we have to pay 70 for some of the biggest $10 games. The Last of Us Part 1, a 2022 remake of a game from 2013 that received a remaster in 2014, retailing for $70 US. Why is this so expensive? Because the toxins released spending $70 are far healthier than burning it. This is what I'd consider to be a bad deal in gaming. Alright, let's just use this chart here to compare all releases of The Last of Us. In 2013, you got the initial release for $60, considered Game of the Year by millions, one of the best stories told in all of gaming alongside incredibly tightly designed gameplay. And that's just the single player campaign. You got multiplayer as well, plus a downloadable single player prequel for an extra $15. The original 2013 release was well worth it in every sense of the word. Say it really fast. But with the title releasing within the final year of the PlayStation 3's life before the PlayStation 4 took over, those who didn't already have the console weren't super willing to invest in one. Thus, 1 year later, The Last of Us Remastered for PlayStation 4 launched for $50. Improved visuals, frame rate, the DLC is included in the package, free of charge. Plus, there's a new photo mode, features utilizing the PlayStation 4 controller. This isn't the most exciting remaster, but it was a necessary one. PlayStation 4 user base the chance to play one of the greatest games of all time in the most definitive way possible at a discounted price that would continue to drop over time. 8 years later. This game better look like Satan's worst nightmare.
An orb of immense power.
It looks like you just had a bad dream. The Last of Us Part 1 is a remake of the 2013 game. Remaster like the 2014 game, and putting them all side by side, wow, you can tell. To be fair, during the cutscenes and other in-game moments, the differences can be more drastic than you think. They truly did rebuild this game, but a lot of the differences feel like just that. Not necessarily an upgrade, just it looks different now. Going from the original PS3 game to Part 1 on PS5 is a huge step up, but from remastered on PS4, like, there should have been a bonus feature in Part 1. A fucking bird that tells you when something's different. If anything, they took more stuff out with the exclusion of the multiplayer mode. And yes, the game looks better now, but The Last of Us Remastered still looks better than 90% of the games releasing these days, and you can play that on PlayStation 5. And how many times can they keep just enhancing graphics on a game and expect people to care? There's one more pixel on the screen in The Last of Us Part 1 too. Well, there is more content. Yeah, hopefully it's obvious why I think that's a bad deal, though I can understand why some people have no problem spending that kind of cash on this kind of game. What you spend your money on is your own damn business. Until the government gets involved. I guarantee the people who complain about this just bought the stupidest goddamn thing ever. This is why I guarantee it. Blizzard Arcade Collection. A handful of games developed by Blizzard before they changed their mind on going bankrupt. A solid little retro distraction with some cool bonus features and variations of the games included. They actually went in and created definitive versions of these Super Nintendo games, combining elements from other console versions into one, which is awesome. For $20, this is a great way to play these vintage games. One problem, these games are available for free on Blizzard's website. Well, not really free. They cost the guilt of not buying the arcade collection. Now, let's be fair here. The versions of the Lost Vikings and Blackthorn Blizzard has available on their website are the DOS versions, and Rock and Roll Racing is more of a cut-down demo of the full game with loads of content missing. The arcade collection contains the console versions of these games, plus the definitive editions, which have loads of value to them. Plus, later on, they released a free update putting 2 games that aren't on Blizzard's website for free in the collection. I think the initial thought of, oh, they're releasing a collection of games for $20 when they're also offering PC downloads of the games included for free, what a crock, is understandable, but they included a lot more than those free versions ever will. And it's not like they removed the free downloads after they released Arcade Collection, so this, I wouldn't say it's a bad deal, though I wouldn't say it's a necessarily good one either, especially when it initially launched with only 3 titles. I'd say this is wholeheartedly an deal. But that just begs the question, what do I consider a good deal in gaming? I stole this. When the Sega Dreamcast was doing really bad, like pretty bad, really bad, a deal was offered where if you signed up for Sega's online service, SegaNet, for $22 a month on a 2-year plan, you'd get a Dreamcast console. You just get one. I mean, you get a free video game console by signing up for a service you'd possibly sign up for once you buy said video game console. It's like, sure, I'll sign up for PlayStation Plus, and then they give you a whole ass PlayStation 5. Like, hey, I wouldn't complain, but this tactic seems backwards. You'd expect if there would be any deal, you'd get the online service for free after buying the console, not getting the console for free after buying the online service. But hey, I'd be an ass for saying this is anything but a good deal. Oh wow, f this guy. It goes without saying though, you can't do a deal like this without vibes of an oh f mentality. And within a few months, Sega announced the deal didn't work. But a good deal is still a good deal, even if it's born out of a company on the verge of bankruptcy. It's our duty as consumers to take advantage of others' misery, even our own. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Anniversary Edition on Nintendo Switch for $70. Here's a picture of that, and here's a picture of something not worth $70. Get The Last of Us on PlayStation 5 for $70. How about Skyrim on Switch for that price? I mean, the $70 price transition was pretty much exclusively for those new consoles introduced. The Switch is still sitting pretty with a $60 price cap for most games. But let's roll out the red carpet for another damn version of Skyrim. To be fair, this is a bundle. The base Skyrim game for $60 plus the Anniversary Edition DLC upgrade, which would normally cost $20 standalone. Now only $10 via this method. Now the DLC itself, this Anniversary Edition originally launched alongside the PS5 and Xbox Series versions of Skyrim in November of 2021, being offered as an upgrade on top of another upgrade. It came to Nintendo Switch out of nowhere a year later and includes new content. I ain't kidding. For $20, this is incredibly weak DLC. It's a bunch of items and gear, some quests. I mean, decent enough add-on content, but for $20? On top of the $60 for the base Skyrim game, which is $10 more than the superior special edition on the other more powerful consoles, an Anniversary Edition doesn't even come alongside any next-gen upgrades like it did on PS5, which kind of warranted the release of Anniversary Edition to begin with. But hey, Anniversary Edition on Switch does improve the graphics slightly, and now the game runs worse than it did without the DLC. God, after that, I need something slightly more positive. Well, I did say slightly. Super Mario 3D All-Stars, a compilation of Super Mario 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy on Nintendo Switch for $60. Now, due to a lack of bonus features and other games included, many consider this to be overpriced. Well, let's do some math here. Nintendo sold Nintendo 64 and Wii games on the Wii U's Nintendo eShop. They valued Super Mario 64 at $10 and Super Mario Galaxy at $20. And while they didn't sell GameCube games, we could do some quick math and figure they'd sell Super Mario Sunshine for $15. Nintendo wouldn't do this to me. We are really close. We talk all the time.
Hi, this is Nintendo customer support.
My DS won't turn on. Well, this price accounts for the baseline, just the game experience for the most part. 3D All-Stars enhances the games. If you squint, Mario 64 got the least attention here. You could compare it to the standalone Wii U release, and that one you could save and load suspend points whenever you want it. You can't do that here. The game looks and controls are better in 3D All-Stars, and it's interestingly based on a Japan-only release of the game, including Rumble support. Sunshine is now in widescreen with an increased resolution, Galaxy can now be played with a standard controller, and all games can be played portably, which you could warrant a price increase for that. On paper. That's not a feature of the game, that's a feature of the Nintendo Switch. If you list portability as a feature of a Switch game, what are you doing? The Xbox version of this game is more expensive because it has the feature of using an Xbox controller to play it. The bonus content is pitiful in this collection. Basically just the soundtracks of the three games, a feature that was included because no thought had to be put into it. At the end of the day, considering everything that's been included and the enhancements to each game, the value of this collection to me is around $50 to $55, which when it retail for $60, I don't really think that's anything to freak out about. If you're somebody who refuses to pay a couple bucks more than what you think the imaginary value of a product is, you're probably fucking awesome, which means you would love Gears of War Ultimate Edition on Xbox One, a $40 remaster of Gears of War on Xbox 360. I only have $5, but I just found out taking out a loan is free! For a series with 4 entries on the same console, you'd expect to see a Gears of War collection for that price. Just remastering the first game feels like something's missing here. Well, lucky us, Microsoft included the Xbox 360 versions of all these titles for free, playable on Xbox One, even the first game. Oh man, I always wanted to play that! I mean, Gears of War Ultimate Edition is a good remaster, though with how readily available the first game was and how the other games weren't initially included, I'd say this was originally an deal. Though after they ran this promotion, it became a damn good one. It only lasted from August 2015 to December 2015, but hey, if you have a problem with that, take it up with the passage of time. Wanna hear another bad deal in gaming? Mass Effect 3 Special Edition for Wii U. Why did I buy this? Because it's special. And what makes it special is, I picked up all by myself. A launch title for Wii U, the third entry in the Mass Effect series. A series of games that really benefits from playing each entry to move your save file over from one to another. Of course, Mass Effect 1 was only on Xbox 360, so when Mass Effect 2 released on PlayStation 3, they incorporated an interactive comic that enabled you to cruise through an abridged Mass Effect 1 story and make the decisions you would have made that could alter how your story goes in Mass Effect 2. But then they eventually released Mass Effect Trilogy on Xbox 360 and PS3, bundling all games together while also putting Mass Effect 1 out on PlayStation for the first time. That launched during the holiday of 2012 for $59.99. Mass Effect 3 Special Edition launched on Wii U that same holiday for $59.99. Okay, well, it's Special Edition. There's gotta be something special about it. That's not special. Funky Barn's on it too. Sure, you get a new interactive comic. A bunch of the DLC is included, plus the M597 Landon weapon. It's only in the Wii U version. You know what else is only in the Wii U version? A good reason to buy Mass Effect 3. But they couldn't bother to price this game at at least $50? Bringing the trilogy over would take 3 times the work. This game was so cheap on the other platforms because on Xbox 360, it was a matter of putting discs in cases. And on PlayStation 3, they just had to bring over the original Mass Effect and that's it. So I get why this bundle didn't come to Wii U. But why was it the same damn price? Ooh, well, Wii U gamepad functionality. Yeah, because doing this playing Mass Effect 3 feels badass. Why hurt my finger? That's not to say the Wii U had no good deals. Take a look at Bayonetta 2. Had launched with the entire first game on a disc included for free. And they had to port the whole game to Wii U. It's not like Mass Effect Trilogy where they just threw the old discs in the package. No, they just understood how Bayonetta 1 was never on Nintendo platforms, and with Bayonetta 2 being a Wii U exclusive, well, better way to sell people on that than include the first game for free. Okay, well, I'm out of ideas. They continued this tradition when the game was re-released on Nintendo Switch, this time with a download code for Bayonetta 1 included. Will always be a good deal. I mean, 16 characters included for free? Best I could do is 15. Nintendo Land included in the Wii U Deluxe set? That's a $60 value for only $50 more than the basic one. Getting one of 4 free games with Mario Kart 8 around launch, the titles like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, Yoshi's Woolly World, and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze all retailing for less than $60? Nintendo was handing out some pretty solid deals during this generation. But then, it happened. In the era of the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo wasn't too interested in cutting consumers a deal. Case in point, the Switch version of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. $50 on Wii U when it released as a brand new video game, discounted to $20 in 2016. Nintendo Switch version releases in 2018 for $60. What did they add to this version? The goddamn Pope? Okay, so what's the problem again? Well, outside of a new playable character, Funky Kong, which is basically just an easy mode, Tropical Freeze on Switch features less choppy loading screens when entering a level and a new snout. $60. They should charge monthly for this. Tropical Freeze is truly one of the greatest games of all time. The Nintendo Switch version is the best out there. And in a vacuum, it's worth $60. There is $60 worth of an experience here. But when it launched at $50 and was discounted to $20 and then this version comes out at $60 with barely anything new added, I'm sorry. It feels like these companies try to lure you in with a good deal, then eventually just rip everything from you because, they already got you. PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live Gold. You'd sign up for these to play online multiplayer, but as a bonus, you get free games every month. For $60 a year, most people are okay with that for online multiplayer alone. Adding a handful of free games on top of that? That's just icing on the cake. The cake is nails. Yeah, that price for online multiplayer alone is a bit much, which is why all these incentives are being thrown in to keep customers happy. Like removing the need for an Xbox Live Gold subscription to access Netflix on Xbox consoles. That's incentive. But I'll gladly take a few free games a month for doing nothing. Look at this lineup of content from the month of March in 2020. The Batman the Enemy Within, Shantae Half Genie Hero, Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, Sonic Generations? According to Xbox, that's nearly $100 worth of value. Hell, if they offered just these games for the year, you're making your money back on the Xbox Live investment. Damn, if that's the kind of deal we got in March of 2020, then what about in November of 2022? Thank you? It's really hard to complain considering you're paying for online multiplayer and the games are a bonus, but What the hell is this? Obviously, a service like Xbox Game Pass is where a lot of the real value lies. I mean, access to hundreds of games for a monthly price. I'm not specifying because it depends on where you sign up for the service. Buy a ton of Pop-Tarts, it's free. But that's what it comes down to. Do you value what the product is giving enough to warrant paying what they're asking for? Or do you just want to slime yourself around the price? The value of games is completely subjective. Just because I don't find a game to be a good deal doesn't mean you should or shouldn't buy them. Hell, you can find a game to be a bad deal and still buy it. As long as you have the money to spend and your reasoning is, I want that, that's all you really need. But it's still interesting to dissect what you personally find to be worth it. So I ask you to think about it yourself. What do you think is a good or bad deal in gaming? And before you say Nintendo customer support is a bad deal, they hung up on me for the 5th time today asking to replace my DS. I know. Hey y'all, Scott here. This is Sonic 3D Blast. This is a hernia. Spot the difference. Ugh. Do I even have to explain myself here? Who's ever looked at this and said, delicious? Sonic 3D Blast. Sonic the Hedgehog's jump to 3D. Oh, world's quickest sin. This has always been a strange one. The Sonic the Hedgehog series was hot in the early 90s, but started to wane a bit as the decade went on due to the Sega Genesis reaching the end of its life cycle and the following system, the Sega Saturn, not attaining that level of popularity, alongside the fact that after Sonic and Knuckles in 1994, we didn't get a new mainline Sonic game until 1998 with Sonic Adventure on the Sega Dreamcast. That's a long time to go without a new game, so how do we keep Sonic relevant, Sega asked? We're on the news! I have a complicated relationship with this game, as I feel many people do. See, this isn't one of the crown jewels of the Sonic franchise. It seems that everybody's in agreement this isn't a great game. Yet, I've never seen anybody actively hate it. Not like it, sure, but hate? That's like picking on a dog with no legs. I know this game isn't great, but I still kind of like it. It's like dating a bad boy. You never marry it, but Sonic 3D Blast came to fruition after Sonic Team toyed with the concept of a 3D-styled Sonic title while developing Sonic 3, but what they were envisioning would have required certain chips to be included in the Sonic 3 game cartridge, which would have made a Sonic game more expensive than the child who wanted it was worth. So, that idea was scrapped for Sonic 3. And that's how Sonic 3 became a good game. But the idea of a 3D Sonic on the Sega Genesis just wouldn't go away!
That's called an intrusive thought!
No, it's Sonic 3D Blast.
Yup!
However, the next generation of console gaming was upon us, allowing for 3D games to be a standard, not a novelty. The Sega Saturn had officially released, which is why this was the perfect time to make a 3D Sonic on the Genesis. No, wait. Now it is. Yeah, even though the Sega Saturn had been on the market since 1994, Sega was still interested in supporting the Genesis with Sonic content, even when the Saturn had nothing of the sort. Sonic Team wanted to branch out from the franchise for a bit with games like Nights into Dreams, and I guess Sega as a whole was alright with putting Sonic on the back burner for a little bit. Maybe help give some of their other games some time to shine. I mean, come on, name 80 Sega Genesis games that aren't Sonic. Bet you can't. But that didn't mean Sonic development wasn't going on, just wasn't a huge priority for Sega at the time. A handful of Sega Game Gear releases, Sega Master System titles, Knuckles Chaotix on the Sega 32X, the series was far from dead. But throughout 1995 and 96, it was being used to support smaller factors of Sega's business rather than their major new console. Maybe they thought the Saturn didn't need the help. It was getting new games regardless. We should focus on giving Game Gear players a reason to get out of bed today. I don't know. I mean, I get it. Sonic Labyrinth probably cost less than half a bug to produce, but at the cost of your new system that needed to be successful, not having a killer app or even just a single damn game from a series everybody recognized, it obviously didn't work out for them. So f*** it, let's make a 3D Sonic for the Sega Genesis! So why a 3D Sonic on this system? Why wake up in the morning? I don't know! Well see, Sega was developing a Sonic game for the Sega Saturn. It was was meant to be a response to 3D gaming and nothing more. Sonic X-treme was being created by Sega Technical Institute in North America as the Sega Saturn's big holiday title for 1996. But just by watching the promotional videos, you can tell the project was directionless. It felt like this was being cobbled together to show that Sonic and Sega by proxy can stand toe-to-toe with the other guys in their fancy big penis 3D platformers, so of course Sega showed up to the baking competition with this. What the hell was this game? It didn't look bad per se, it was more so just confusing. Like, what are these levels? What are you doing in them? How do you progress? Why is there a fisheye lens? This game just looked like a 2D game you could move towards and away from the camera in. Not anything nearly as impressive as Super Mario 64, hell, even Crash Bandicoot. And a 2D game you can move towards and away from the camera in is exactly what that game is. Regardless, Extreme was poised to be the mainline Sonic series jump to 3D. Deal with it, life f***ing stinks. But now without a taste of 3D for Genesis owners, as Sega crafted a completely separate 3D Sonic experience for that console. Sonic 3D Blast. These two were supposed to come out at the same time, much like how a game like Assassin's Creed Unity released for PS4 and Xbox One the same day as Assassin's Creed Rogue for PS3 and Xbox 360. It's not that I'm the first to think of that analogy, I was the first brave enough to say it. It's all about offering customers who haven't upgraded consoles yet an affordable option of their own, and Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Genesis seemed to be exactly that. Poverty 3D Sonic. And with it being the last Sonic game on the system, hell, one of the last games on the system in general, you can view this as a bit more of a celebrational release. Like, hey, let's do one last Sonic game on this guy and make it 3D to show just how far we've come. This was set to be an incredible and momentous holiday season for Sonic. Until the meth wore off. Yeah, all those things I said about Sonic X-treme, those weren't just my opinions. Those were core to the reason why that game got canceled. This thing was not working out. Though thankfully, Sonic 3D Blast functioned. So this became Sonic's grand leap to 3D, because in addition to a Sega Genesis version, Sega released a Sega Saturn version that holiday in place of Sonic X-treme, which made them look even more pathetic. You're releasing a 3D game 2 months after Super Mario 64 and it's this? Even calling it 3D Blast is so cocky when you know what this is. Like, they could have called Mario 64 Mario 3D Blast, but they didn't, because a more generic title was coming later. Sonic 3D Blast wasn't primarily developed by Sega's Sonic team or any of the other in-house developers. Rather, it was created by Traveler's Tales. Who are these guys? Well, they developed Pugsy. Those have to be my last words. But you probably know them best now for their work on the LEGO games, so they originally developed a far greater variety of titles, and many of which were licensed movie games, such as Toy Story. In fact, it was their work on that game in particular to garner Sega's attention, seeing how well they were able to craft 3D-like visuals on the Genesis. So give them Sonic, and hey, why not, make a Sega Saturn version as well, just to be safe, because, you know, Sonic X-treme might get canceled just as much as I might be dead. You know, Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Genesis had a relatively quick development time, only taking roughly 8 months to complete, with the Sega Saturn version being whipped together even faster in just 7 weeks. What once was just meant to be a supplementary title became the core holiday release, and thus, Sonic 3D Blast received a middling response, at least on the Sega Saturn side of things. The Genesis version was actually praised at the time. This was impressive for the hardware. This hardware, not this one. Which that just goes to show how this game was doomed to age poorly. I mean, if people thought this was outdated on the Sega Saturn, just think what I thought playing this on GameCube. Yes, myself, alongside countless others, first experienced 3D Blast via the Sonic Mega Collection. This title definitely stood out amongst the crowd, and I loved it for that. I mean, hey, you have Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, that's all fine and good, but variety is the spice of life, and Sonic 3D Blast was a cool offshoot title to switch to now and then. And much like the actual mainline Sonic games, I never got far. Hell, in this one, I don't even think I beat the first level. Well, that's all going to change today. See, my soul still has unfinished business here on Earth. That's why I'm still here. So I assume my destiny is to finish Sonic 3D Blast and figure out its worth. Then, and only then, will I finally go to hell. Or, next best option, I'll be resurrected. So, let's do it. Let's fulfill one of my 2 lifelong goals. Like I have a choice. While my first experience with 3D Blast was via the Sonic Mega Collection, compilations have pretty much been my only way of experiencing this game. Actually holding the game box and cartridge is a surreal experience. Yeah, sure, playing it on GameCube, I understood how impressive this was as a Genesis game, But that just goes to show how much playing on the original hardware can enhance the experience. When you're playing via an actual cartridge on an old school TV and you see this? Was that Sonic? With birds? Of course, the second most shocking element here was the fact we have a CGI opening cutscene on a Sega Genesis cartridge. I don't care how many frames it is, I don't care what the resolution is. This was one of the coolest things in any Sonic game I saw back in the day. And I played this on the GameCube. On the actual Sega Genesis, this is still mind-blowing. Even the title screen here looks impressive for the hardware. Hopping into the main menu, we have 3 options: starting the game, tweaking the button layout, and a sound test. No continue option or save feature like in Sonic 3? You'd assume by 1996 this would be a standard, much like how I assume Sonic 3D Blast is gonna be good. Well, on to the game, and unlike other classic Sonic titles, we get this little story blurb at the beginning. Are you ready to meet the Flickies? Yeah. Mysterious birds who live in another dimension and can travel anywhere through large rings. Large rings? Wow. Realism, I guess. Dr. Robotnik learns about the Flickies. I will change the Flickies into robots and have them search for the Chaos Emeralds for me. Using the infinite power of the emeralds, I can conquer the world. Because of birds. Sonic visits Flicky Island to see his friends, but the only thing he finds are robots. There's a tree right behind him. Robotnik made my friends like this. I must save them. Robotnik must be stopped. Sonic starts to defeat the enemies in order to rescue the Flickies who are trapped inside. Story of my fucking life. Go, Sonic. You can warp through the big rings. With the help of the Flickies, I don't buy it. Chase after Robotnik and defeat his plans. Yeah, kick his plans ass. And here it is, Sonic 3D Blast. He looks miserable. This is 3D? I can get the same feeling looking at my hand. Yeah, everything about this game needs to include a dozen asterisks next to it. Like, seriously? 3D? The graphics are pre-rendered. Now, when I heard that word when I was younger, sure, I'd go along with the mob, but I didn't know why we were pillaging the village. Well, imagine creating a 3D model of something. The Sega Genesis can't display that, but you know what it can? A picture of that 3D model. So yeah, these are all 2D sprites based on images of 3D rendering. So deep down that family tree, you could consider Sonic 3D Blast to be 3D. But it's played from a top-down perspective, or to be more exact, isometric, meaning it's at an angle. And that is like the cheapest way to pretend your game is 3D. Oh, Sonic used to only be able to go left and right, well now we can go up and down. Yeah, was Adventure on Atari 3D? No, it wasn't 3D, it stunk. The game Super Mario RPG came out months before this, and that pretty much did everything 3D Blast is doing right now without having to brag about it in its title. This is nothing new and nothing to tout, and the 3D honestly makes this game so much clunkier than any other classic Sonic experience. Well, he feels so damn slippery here. It's like I'm on ice the whole damn game. I guess skidding around is supposed to convey Sonic speed, because without it, like, this is the fastest thing alive? Yeah, maybe in a post-apocalyptic world ran by slugs. Well, let's just remove speed from our minds for a bit here. Done. Let's just critique this as a functional video game. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Precise jumping is a myth here. Being not 3D can make it so confusing to know where you are in relation to the environment. And even if you do know, the game can tell you to fuck off. I mean, movement isn't horrible or anything. It's responsive and something you can get used to. But that's not a compliment. That's the bare minimum a video game should be. It sounds like one though, so go ahead, I don't care. So standard Sonic the Hedgehog games at the time couldn't be simpler. Just get to the end of the stage. Sonic 3D Blast is similarly very straightforward, though as a kid, I never knew what the hell I was doing here. I just knew, surely, it must be important. Well, since we have to save birds trapped inside robots, we have to defeat each and every enemy in a stage to collect said birds. Holy shit! We gotta bring the Flickies we collect to this giant ring. That's what you do. Collect birds, bring them to the ring. Repeat, but don't rinse. This is the gameplay loop. It functions. It's just damn boring, and I feel like a lot of that's because of how the game looks, but also the fact that the gameplay is just damn boring. Every stage has these checkerboard floors with really unappealing colors that honestly hurt the eyes more than anything. It's kind of disorienting, both to look at and also to know where you are in this world. when the game's about finding all the enemies and I can barely even tell where I am in the level because 90% of the screen is floor, that's a problem. Plus, when you get hit with some flickies on you, they get scattered around and you have to get them back, but with how the graphics look, it's like trying to find a bird in a haystack. It's really hard. I don't even know where a haystack is. And without Slippery that's just zooming past the ground, not knowing where you were and not knowing where you're going, Sonic 3D Blast just gives me a headache. Conspiracy theory number 1, Tylenol funded this. However, it's something you get used to as time goes on. The overall layout and level design here works. Nothing's really all too fun per se, nothing really sticks out, but it's not bad. It's just there. This gameplay feels like it was designed around the 3D gimmick rather than because they had a core concept for a good game. Yeah, you kill like 10 enemies and bring birds to a ring. This isn't a game, it's a list of to-dos. Sonic 3D Blast is about as deep as getting out of bed in the morning. It's so damn simple, but goddamn is it hard to follow through with it. Just the same damn thing over and over and over again, and it's not even really that challenging, it's just Sonic 3D Blast! This game's in a weird place, okay, because there's nothing really that interesting going on here. It doesn't do anything inherently well. It's just an experience that happens. It's, by all accounts, a worthless video game. He's kind of cute, though. Yeah, 3D Blast is an anomaly. It's not fun, but it's not very good either. Though what makes it appealing, regardless of these detractors, is the charm, uniqueness, and overall general playability. There's something pathetically endearing about a game trying to pass off as a 3D experience in the 90s, and the fact that it isn't actually 3D makes the game so much more playable today than other titles. They designed this as a game that looked cutting edge, but was a standard 16-bit Sega Genesis game at its heart, rather than a game that truly was cutting edge being crammed onto the Sega Genesis when it didn't belong. Compare this to many of the other early 3D games at the time. While this isn't anything to write home about, in comparison to the others, I guarantee it's one of the most playable today. It runs smooth. All you can do is run around, jump, and perform a spin dash. It's very simple, which can make it kind of boring and monotonous, but hey, it makes it age far better than many of the early 3D games on PlayStation. Well, yeah, the visuals are obviously dated. I don't know, they sort of have their own weird little style to them. It's kind of charming. This game is sort of garbage and obsolete, yet very competent and playable with a lot of character, which makes it so oddly lovable to me. Dude, your brother just fucking shot me. Oh my god, when is he gonna learn? Conspiracy theory number 2. This game isn't too bad. Whenever I see it in the latest Sega Genesis collections, I always pop it on for a little bit to run around the first level. It's kind of enjoyable to jump about and go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Season 1 Reloaded of Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 is officially upon us. It comes out today at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, but we already have patch notes for the update. It details everything new that is coming to the game with Season 1 Reloaded, including the raid, including shipment, including the Warzone Cup. We're going to be talking about all of that. But on top of this, there is a ton of bug fixes, weapon changes, and things along those lines. So throughout this video, that is what we are going to be looking at. All of these various changes that are happening in the Season 1 Reloaded update. And I must say, there are a lot of them. So what we're going to be doing through this is going through all of the patch notes because the patch is not yet live, looking at everything that is there, discussing what is new, and what you can expect when the update actually comes out. So without further ado, let's dive into the patch notes. So having a look at the patch notes, it starts out by going over everything that's kind of new within Season 1 Reloaded. But then after that, it dives into the first thing that we have, which is the double XP weekend. So for Sony players, it starts today at 10 a.m. Pacific time when the update goes live, and then goes all the way into the 19th. However, for everyone else, you get double player XP and double weapon XP from the 15th to the 19th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. After this, we have Shipment. Shipment is a 6v6 map. It's a very small map. Weapon challenges are going to be the mainstay on this map, and we've kind of talked about this on the channel before, but it is coming back. The next thing is the raid. So the first episode of the raid comes out today, and if you want to jump into the raid, there are 3 ways you can do so. Complete a specific daily challenge either in multiplayer or Spec Ops, and then when you complete that, you get a key, and then you can play the raid on that given day. After this, you can place in the top 20 in any Warzone 2.0 Battle Royale playlist. The easiest one to do this in is obviously quads. or in DMZ, use the final exfil helicopter with at least 30,000 in cash. That is by far the hardest one to do. The easiest one is just getting the top 20 of a quads game just like that. Once you get in there, there's a raid you can complete, you can earn rewards, you get to see the next portion of the story, and of course, we're going to be diving more into that over the coming days. After this, we have the Warzone Cup. Essentially, this is Rocket League within Warzone. You get on ATVs, there's a ball in the middle, and you try to score on the other team's goal. You can pick up shock sticks, stall the other team's vehicles, and the most goals wins. It's a very interesting mode, not like anything we've really ever seen before within Call of Duty, but hey, it's pretty cool. Now we dive into the more patch notey part of all of this. So first of all, we have the quality of life changes. A lot of this is to do with double XP tokens. They now display how long you have left on your double XP tokens. They can be equipped in the pause menu in game, which I think is a really good thing. XP tokens can no longer be accidentally activated during a double XP event. In other words, they didn't stack, so now when there's a double XP event going on, like this weekend, you can't accidentally activate one and essentially waste it. On top of this, you no longer lose if you join a game in session, and then you lose that game, so that's good. And then just various quality of life changes having to do with like weapon tuning and how it displays the menu. Similarly with the social menu, it now works a little bit better. I think throughout the entire year, we're going to be receiving UI updates, so really no surprising there. Same with showcases, channels, that kind of thing. It's important to note that the Combat Record 2.0 for Warzone is not coming out within this update. They say we can expect it within Season 2, which is not really a good thing in my opinion. But then we dive into weapon balancing, starting out with the MX9, increased movement speed, ADS speed, and sprint to fire speed on the 32 round mag. So that's specifically for one individual attachment. Then the Kastov 74U, small reduction to close damage range. 3 hits to kill require at least 1 chest hit. So a little bit of a nerf to the Kastov 74U. The Kastov 545, you have increased muzzle velocity, small decrease to hip spread, increased close damage, and increased the test damage multiplier. That is a big buff for that one there. Moving into the SMGs, you have the Val 47 SMG, reduced hip spread, increased movement speed, and increased far damage, so a big buff there. After this, we have pistols, the Basilisk Revolver, blocking Basilisk compensators and flash hiders on the F-Tac arrow barrel. So specifically for that barrel, you can't use compensators and flash hiders. They also adding a muzzle attachment usage on the F-Tac arrow barrel. So in other words, they're just kind of changing some of the attachments that you can use with others. On the Desert Eagle, aka the 50GS, you have reduced hip spread, increased one-hit headshot range, increased damage range, increased neck and upper shoulder location damage multipliers, increased bullet velocity, and increased range with the SA Longshot. Lots of buffs for that one. Moving into shotguns. The Expedite 12, you have added guard category, which has 3 different attachments, the TV guard, the AZ shot guard, and the Azarov T15. With the Riot Shield, you've reduced movement speed, reduced melee damage to a 3-hit kill. That is a huge nerf. Shield movement animation improvement, and longer switch time pulling out the throwing knife. That is a massive nerf to the Riot Shield, which means the challenges are going to be a lot harder. Thankfully, we have shipment, but that 3-hit kill is going to be a pain. And then launchers, we have the Joker. Missile no longer lands out of bounds when targeting a wall on the edge of the map, and improved the thermal readability when aiming in. So really not too many big changes there. But that is all of the weapon changes. There's a lot of them in there, but nothing too big. Nothing that I really think is going to change up the meta. Some of the biggest ones there, I have to say, are the Kastov 545, the Desert Eagle, and of course, the Riot Shield. Then we have some vehicle balancing. The first is reduced collision damage taken by the heavy chopper, especially from landing, so you won't blow yourself up nearly as much. Increased health and damage resistance on the UTV. Increased falling damage on the ATV and UTV. Added custom turret rotation speed on the APZ, light tank, and heavy tanks. In other words, they should be different on all 3 now. Increased damage done by AI to both the LTV versions. In other words, AI got a buff. Reduced distance that boats can be brought out of water. And that's essentially all of the big changes. Ally visibility. Ally nameplates disappear when enemy is in the direct path of an ally. This is really big. The amount of times I've seen someone and then saw a blue dot above their head and thought it was my teammate. This should fix that. Then we move into kill streaks. So basically, most of these are just simply fixing bugs. So we're not really going to dive into that. However, field upgrades, you got portable radars, can now stick to vehicles. I think that's pretty cool. Throw it on your own vehicle, drive around with it. You can see where enemies are. I think that's a nice little touch there. Then I wanted to quickly dive into attachments here. So first of all, tuning in general. Most beneficial tuning value magnitudes have been increased. So in other words, weapon tuning is actually going to do more, and some harmful tuning value magnitudes have been decreased. So in other words, they buffed weapon tuning. Then as far as optics goes, they increase the range of all optics thermal target identification ranges. So in other words, thermals work a little bit better. And then the rest are essentially bugs here. If you want to pause it and read through them, you're more than welcome to, but we're not going to dive too much. Operators, the LA Thieves have been added into the game. So then we dive into some more bug fixes specific to game modes, specific to maps and Core 66, things like that. Some Spec Ops bugs that have been fixed. Again, if you want to read through all of these, we're not going to be reading through them all just because they're a little bit boring. But if you want to read through them, you can. So then we dive into Warzone 2, just an update to some of the individual playlists here, changing some player numbers. The Warzone Cup is 3v3, in other words, there's 6 players in it. Diving into DMZ, the max players is 60, and Assimilation up to 6 players per squad. So in other words, you can join with other teams and have up to 6 players, is I think what they're saying there. Now, as far as the map goes, this is kind of the new thing within DMZ. It is a building called Building 21. Apparently, based off of what we're seeing, it's a laboratory, it's hidden on the map, you have to get access to it. Apparently, this is how you are going to get the new weapon, the Chimera. Once you get in here, you can get the Chimera, then you can extract with it, and that's how you get it. We don't know as of yet if there's a multiplayer challenge to get that weapon, but essentially, this is what that building is going to look like. Now, diving into some Stronghold and Blacksite stuff, essentially, all you need to know from this is that AI has been nerfed. They're not going to nuke you quite as hard as they did before. On top of that, DMZ cash values, general changes to valuable items, and changes to cash rewards for contracts. They don't go into depth as to what those are. Container spawn rates, they increased self-revives, gas masks, and field upgrades in first aid kits. They increased plate carriers, backpacks, and field upgrades in weapon stashes. So if you're looking for specific items, that's kind of like the areas where you should look for them. I'm just going to go through and kind of point out some of the bigger changes in here because there's a lot of things that don't really matter. If you want to read through it all, feel free to pause the video. But first of all, bomb drones. Players with 3 armor plates on the outer radius of an explosion will survive. In other words, bomb drones aren't quite as lethal. Another big one is player revive alert. A sound will play to alert nearby players when players have been revived. That's really good. We needed that in the game for sure. They've improved ground loot a little bit, so that was definitely needed. Buy stations, and when you open up items, it won't just all drop in one area. It'll kind of spread out, making it easier to pick up. And then there are just tons and tons and tons of bug fixes. Now, most of these are essentially very specific issues. If you want to read through all of them, the patch notes will be linked down below. But they're just trying to kind of bring the game up to snuff and kind of what we expected from Warzone 1. I'm not going to read through all of these because, as you can see, there are a ton of them. They are very intricate and in-depth. So there's no point in literally going through all of these. But in other words, they've made the game better, and same goes with DMZ. One thing we can expect to see is less dropped games, less crashing, things like that, and less bugs in general. The one thing that this doesn't go much in depth with, and we'll have to wait to see once the update actually comes out, is the Chimera. As I mentioned, the current leak for this is you have to get into Building 21 in DMZ and then extract with the Chimera to unlock it. This will work similar to the M13 that we have already seen. However, there may also be a multiplayer challenge. We're waiting to see on that one. But essentially, this is everything that's new. As we get more information on the raid, as we get more information on the Chimera, I will have a video for you guys probably later today, and of course, a story video going over the raid later on this week. So if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed, have notifications on. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard, and I wonder where you are. Mysterious, that's the part you want.
probably seen this in me before. It's pretty funny, but as a Max Payne fan, it's also sad, because I can't do this. I can't satisfy my thirst for more with an all-new game, having already done that when I was 15. And since then, I've played every Max Payne game multiple times, beaten their highest difficulties, even went through the wealth of mods. I've gotten Max Payne 1 on my phone, Max Payne 2 on hand, and Max Payne 3 online.
No! No! Get away from me! Get away!
I've exhausted these games, and will continue to do so. But like Burnout, Halo, and Fear, it's a style of game that stopped being iterated upon. It turns out the only thing that bring back Max Payne was Max Payne. And as excited as I am for Remedy's remaster with Rockstar's Riches, there's a certain cynicism to the biggest Max Payne news in years being to play Max Payne 1 and 2 again. But then I remembered there's something Max Payne related that I hadn't experienced. The clones. Total Overdose was made by a developer that produced nothing of note, released by a publisher which never released nothing of note, at a time when it wasn't anything of note. In 2005, Max Payne was recent enough that its imitators were written off for what they were, imitations. Meanwhile, the next generation of consoles was just over the horizon, ones that were about to introduce millions of new players to far more influential third-person shooters. Yet, Total Overdose has managed to retain a small cult following, either for carrying the torch for Max Payne fans, or because it's crazy. Total Overdose isn't the most memorable name, but the most accurate one. Max Payne survived experimental drugs, freezing temperatures, bullets in the head, and falling down multi-story buildings, but was he ever bull-charging people into pace, fighting armies of the dead, or ramming cars into explosive towers? Max Payne 2's firefights were played to the sound of cellos and flutes. Total Overdoses are accompanied by Molotovs. Max Payne dual-wields Mac 10s. Ramiro dual-wields machine gun guitar cases from Desperado. Max Payne can shoot dodge. Ramiro can shoot dodge, flip off walls, bounce off walls, do a 180 shoot dodge, and rewind time itself. And if that wasn't enough, he's given a combo meter that's refilled per kill, granting bonus health and power-ups every 3 kills. And if that wasn't enough, these combos are attached to a scoring system that's tallied at the end of each mission, granting further bonuses to weapons and your character. And if that wasn't enough, there's more of these bonuses to be found within an open world. And there's an open world, one with side missions, vehicles, character progression, bonus points, and multiple zones. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. So, I'm just going to ask the question, do these things improve the game? No. Forcing you to drive vehicles with the physics of Tony Hawk's Underground and mandatory side missions doesn't improve a game about shooting enemies in bullet time, something that nobody could have guessed.
Just need a
Let's
moment
run
to
these down
catch
one
up.
by one. The movement abilities. Okay, these are actually the best part. It is hard not to smile when you're gunning down an enemy one-handing an AK upside down. And being able to 180 at any time is genuinely useful in a game where enemies are constantly swarming you from all angles, while also in keeping with the game's inspirations. It's something I would like to have in a Max Payne game. Really, the problem with these moves isn't that they're useless, it's the environments rarely facilitate them over a basic shoot dodge. Half the time I bounced off the wall, it was an accident, while the other half was pressing the button combo precisely, only to find out that particular wall wasn't compatible. So this footage has been every time I used the movement abilities. I might have even had to record some extra just then, because the rest of my playthrough is just the shoot dodge, while playing on the hardest difficulty. One might have assumed this game's easy because of the auto-aim, but actually, aiming's the biggest challenge of all. This circle is more meant to represent what your character's attempting to shoot while watching them miss. Now, there is some method to this madness, The developers made Total Overdose primarily for consoles during a time when the industry were still hiring scientists to dissect Bungie's analog controls. So rather than ask players to precisely aim with the input of a curling rock, they use auto-aim. And to stop players from picking off everyone from the moon, all guns are given a low range to funnel you into enemies. But all the logical explanations in the world cannot address the fact that seeing a character aim worse than you can is really annoying. If less so than headshots that require you to time a trigger pull perfectly, or else the headshot is cancelled, and I swear to God this thing is bugged. At first I thought lock-on canceling at different rates might have had to do with playing the game on PC and the game not accounting for high frame rates, kind of like Max Payne, but it's the same on PS2. So it's often best just to stumble towards enemies tapping the fire button, which makes all the extra things Ramiro can do essentially worthless. I'd say the same for the game's loco moves, but that would be a lie. Using El Mariachi on every single boss fight was a big time saver, and the golden gun was nice to have when I needed Ramiro to actually hit something. I didn't even have to worry about spamming these abilities because of the game's multiplier. Whenever you chain together a set number of kills, you're rewarded with loco moves, which given the game's difficulty, meant I almost always had 2 tokens for each of the 7 power-ups. There's not even anything to stop you from using them back to back. It would also be a lie to say this isn't fun, in the same way modding an AR to fire rockets is fun. And it also presents a bit of a catch-22. If you spam these, it becomes even easier than it already is. But if you ignore them as I did, it protracts every firefight that you're rarely in danger of losing. Oh, and that lack of difficulty extends to the score tally. Not that the rewards from it are so grand, I ever strive for the high ratings I got. The game's ease doesn't stem from not having enough dual-wielding weapons or extra bullet time and health
Just
bonuses.
need a moment to catch
Not to
the
mention that in a game that's so short, I question its use. 4 hours into Max Payne, I'm dual-wielding MAC-10s because enemies are dropping it in later levels. 4 hours into Total Overdose, I'm dual-wielding MAC-10s because I leveled up my character. I'm not saying it's worse, I'm asking how it's better. What's the difference here, apart from the developer not being in complete control of when I have these bullet hoses during the campaign? Okay, not doing so hot then. The open world? It sucks. Really bad. It's ugly, small, empty, and my legs are longer than this game's draw distance. Then again, that also describes Saints Row 2, and that's one of my favorite games. In fact, it also, like Total Overdose, requires you to complete side missions before continuing the main story. There's a big difference, though. Side missions in Saints Row 2 involve spraying poo on people's houses, throwing yourself in their cars, riding ATVs in fireproof suits, and more hysterical objectives. Side missions in Total Overdose involve shooting, and driving, and shooting, and driving. I was relieved to find a mission selection menu, but it renders this open world useless. There's no police, no characters, even the side missions aren't integrated into the world. You've got to load each particular level. All that's offered are collectibles, which given the awful driving, platforming, and character progression, is hardly enticing. So, yeah, the one feature Total Overdose added that improves the core gameplay is its rewind mechanic. From Sands of Time. Like that game, it does maintain momentum. One mistake doesn't set you back. Though that's also not a compliment. It contributes to this game's lack of urgency, where even on the verge of death, I don't feel any kind of danger, for when death occurs, I'm right back up anyways, with 8 more chances available. It's why then I'm not entirely comfortable giving this mechanic a stamp of approval. It's more like a band-aid for Total Overdose's core gameplay, consisting of endless lock-on targeting inept enemies with technical difficulties through a chain of shipping containers, factories, and back alleys, with objectives separated by countries, and the biggest padding I've witnessed since Destiny 1. Take this for example. Ramiro sends a speedboat into the top of a mansion's swimming pool, and just when you're torching some rich asshole's estate, there's a locked door. You must backtrack to flip the switch and repeat the start descending down the man's pier, where this level could have just started with the boat you had ascending up to the mansion. And it only gets more egregious. The objective in this temple is to flip a switch that sends data from a satellite
Just need
that
a
needs
moment.
a switch to align it, which needs a switch to power its generator.
Low on mana.
A switch for a switch for a switch. I know the options of game writers are often limited to kill a thing and then the thing press use on it, but Jesus Christ. If this game were a wiggy padded solitaire, it's a 5-hour game that feels like 15, and the thought of replaying it makes me sick. That's not because it isn't interesting. In many ways, Total Overdose was actually an omen of things to come, with its open world, side missions, character progression, collectibles, and driving. There's a whole lot of action games today that very much share this framework. But unlike so many games which paved the way for others, I don't believe there's anything to pull from Total Overdose. None of its features improve core gameplay, which isn't very good in the first place. It throws 30 plates in the air, and frankly, the end result is what I'd expect from the developer of Watchmen, and is not. There's really only two things left about this game that distinguish it, which I'm not sold on. Number one, it's crazy. I remember this game being nominated for GameSpot's Craziest Game of the Year award, and sure, it's got your character flipping off walls with dual-wield shotguns, firing from zip lines, and leaping out of moving vehicles. But not only is this pretty unremarkable in a post-Just Cause world, it's not even that remarkable for the standards of the time. Matrix Path of Neo had a fourth wall-breaking narration from 8-bit avatars of the Wachowskis explaining to the player directly why the Matrix Revolutions is now ending with a Smith made out of the Earth. And AMP3 is, well, AMP3. Number two, it's, Mexican. I'm sorry, but this game's about as Mexican as I am. Blasting Molotov, wearing a sombrero, and every enemy screeching, "Pendejo!" isn't Mexican. It's what Mexico is to a bunch of Europeans living in Copenhagen, because that's where the game's developers were. Next game. One of Max Payne's obvious influences were Hong Kong action films. From the diving, slow motion, camera shots, and Max Payne himself name-dropping John Woo's most famous lead actor. So it only makes sense to present a Max Payne game with Chow Yun-fat himself, directed by John Woo. And that's exactly what Midway Chicago, better known today as NetherRealm, did. Just coming off of PsyOps The Mindgate Conspiracy, a game I really need to cover sometime, Midway wanted to attach their overtly talented developers with a name that could get them the attention they deserved, and just happened to have the connections to ask John Woo for assistance. The result is a game that's not just impressive for 2007, but even today. Max Payne 3's combat presentation is superb, from its bullet trails to the amount of microdestruction in its environment. So it says something that a game released when Max Payne 3 started development is even more destructive. Midway Chicago spent heaps of resources and time to modifying Unreal Engine 3 and all of their assets to react to the player's fire. Not just in triggering scripted objects like lampposts and pieces of construction, but chips in the wood walls, stacked shelves, and even concrete floors in certain stages. It's overwhelming, even to the point of causing the game's visuals to glitch on PC. Now, admittedly, I had played this game before on 360 for another video, and kind of hated it. The frame rate couldn't hold steady at 30 to save its life, and the FOV was disgustingly low. I felt like the TV was taped to my forehead. But having fixed both of those issues on PC, link in the description, it makes sense why the Xbox struggled. Midway threw everything at this game. Every level really is like the hospital shootout in Hard Boiled. There isn't a firefight without some kind of debris, dust, smoke, or particle in the air. It is fantastic. And the game actively facilitates this chaos in not just its level design, but through one of the simplest yet most notable changes this game makes to the usual third-person shooter formula. There's no reloading. Yes, there's that animation which we'll get to, but during normal play, every weapon you pick up, the pistol, shotgun, SMG, rifle, deagle, LMG, and rocket launcher don't have a reload. And it doesn't come at the cost of immersion because, look at this. Is not reloading really the most ridiculous thing going on? And guns still have limited ammo with a 2-weapon limit, so you're actively swapping between whichever tool is most useful in a given fight, while letting you hold down the trigger in the most intense fights, creating that action movie spectacle dynamically. I'm not somebody who is actively against reloading in video games, but here it was absolutely the right call, and in games like Stranglehold, it's something more designers should consider. You can have contemporary weapons that don't reload. It's not a sin. What is are QuickTime events. They're not called as such. Midway gave them the moniker standoffs, where you lean left and right to dodge bullets. It's dumb to look at, slow to play, and kills the game's entire pace every time it happens. Though the reason standoffs exist is because the game has nothing else. Everything you've seen is Stranglehold. It's the opposite of Total Overdose. Thankfully, there are at least a variety of objectives and locations that
I got
previous
some
games
sword.
sorely lacked. While Stranglehold's not very impressive in its raw textures and animations, the spectacle makes up for it, and the different backdrops do present a changing atmosphere and soundscape, with you fighting out in Hong Kong back alleyways and rocky islands, along with penthouses and museums in Chicago. The most notable objective variety are things like strategically placing guitar cases of ammo before each battle, blowing up shipping boats in whatever order you choose, dodging laser grids in the middle of firefights, and best of all, fighting an army of goons while a jazz band is ordered to keep playing, which might be one of the best objectives ever put into a video game. Unfortunately, it's not enough to keep the ceaseless barrage from growing stale. It's not that there isn't any flexibility in this sandbox. The levels aren't just destructible, they're interactable, allowing you to swing across light fixtures, sliding down staircases, run up railings, and land on a moving cart, controlling its direction. That last one was even a scripted set piece in Max Payne 3 that's completely dynamic here. It's also not that Stranglehold doesn't keep introducing new things. It's that the developer stretches this game harder than Quan Chi.
Just need a moment.
Those weapons I mentioned earlier, that's every single one of them. And 3 of those, the Golden Pistol, LMG, and Rocket Launcher, are so rare, the game effectively tops at 4 guns. A pistol, SMG, shotgun, and rifle. The most basic firearms in a shooter. Now, that perhaps wouldn't matter as much if these weapons were more satisfying to shoot, but really, the levels do the heavy lifting in making this game fun, because the core shooting is underwhelming. Not only do the 4 guns sound kinda weak, they're also very inaccurate. Obviously, it's meant to aid the environmental destruction this team puts so much effort into. But when the game starts throwing more bullet sponge enemies at you in the latter half, rolling the dice with these automatic weapons becomes increasingly annoying. Especially when the gameplay loop itself isn't evolving in an interesting way. The only tactics I developed over hours of playtime was cherishing every golden pistol that clearly forced enemies, and learning to spam this game's final distinguishing feature of gameplay, tequila bombs. A meter filled through stylish kills to power up one of 4 abilities. Healing on the fly, a long-range shot, 30 seconds of unlimited ammo and ability, and a spin that kills any in the vicinity. All of them are useful in the right circumstances, and the game's increasing difficulty greatly encourages their use, with Barrage being the most obvious fun. It encapsulates all of this game's strength into one 30-second romp, as does the 4th, which looks particularly goofy with a shotgun, but no more than the jazz band. The problem are these abilities, like the rest of the game, seem very one-note. Where bullet time's an ability that can be used aggressively, defensively, when you're diving through the air, running along, or trying to hit that particular explosive, these powers are rigid. Healing safe are the brink of death, long range takes care of snipers, Barrage is to grin like a kid with fireworks, and the spin is done to skip an annoying firefight. there's not much expression, personalization, or flexibility in the tequila bombs, not like there was in Chicago's previous game. This is particularly apparent later on, where the
That was
game's
my
method
fault.
of difficulty and hard is throwing more enemies at you than can
How
be
much is that thing
killed
I
in
just got?
bullet
I've
time.
never even seen a map
And
like
because
this.
there's no damage resistance when you're low at health, like there secretly is
King
in a
Chaos.
lot of games,
Did they change the maps? Like, did they bring back like old maps? Like, you know, like those old maps that like I put in the standard and just, they didn't come back for ages. I'm guessing they brought some of them back in, have they? I notice even the shapes of some of the maps that I don't recognize anymore. Yeah, Rag, what are you doing?
Just need a moment to catch my breath.
Have you got any divines yet? I've gotten one so far. I got a good time to get them as well because a divine went for 200 chaos. I need to get more relics.
Fine day for exploring. I still remember. May you return with ancient artifacts.
Yo, Rag, you're doing Righteous Fury, aren't you? Don't see a nutty helmet. Some guy sent me it earlier. I was like, holy fuck. Like, I don't know if he crafted it or got lucky, but like, fucking hell, it's crazy. Mic is on, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Oh, is my mic quiet? Oh. Mic might be a little quiet. Alright, there we go. Oh, that's a lot better. You could probably actually hear me now. I think it was going before, but it was like half of what it is now.
an average player must rely on these bombs to win. There's also lots of annoying quirks about this game which become apparent at higher difficulties. Just like Total Overdose, enemies will spawn out of thin air, but this time due to poor scripting and placement rather than technical errors. And there's times when cutscenes are played for both entire armies and a duo, making it possible to waste a tequila bomb for a battle that doesn't exist. Also, this AI...
I've been stranglehold in years. Oh god, Fortnite, you okay there? I gotta get my Christmas present. They're giving away free skins and stuff, don't. Oh god, what's going on in my game? Bruh. What do you get? Did you get one of the cool skins? Ah! It's alright. Not the best one, like, but it's not bad.
Just need a moment to catch my breath.
Prepared for the end?
Alright. I probably could fix that actually.
Just need a moment to catch my breath. Just need a moment to catch my breath.
Hello.
Microsoft's inventory of faulty and
It's not good. And this is a small thing, I know, but years ago I complained about Max Payne 3's clunky footsteps and often used it as an example for whenever I'm talking about unwieldy controls. This is the exact opposite. Tequila moves so quickly it's visually repugnant. When you're forced to adjust your movement constantly, the guns in Doom have more animated frames than your character does. I understand it's meant to give me flexibility in movement, but all it does is take me back to Alpha Protocol. All in all, Stranglehold was ahead of its time. Midway Chicago discussed all of this game's unique qualities being paired with open-ended sandbox levels, vehicles, and their publisher mandating a full multiplayer component up to 8 players. But the effort in making John Woo's Spectacle interactive was so grand, it absorbed the game's entire development. The sandbox levels and vehicle segments were never implemented, and the multiplayer had to stop being iterated upon mid-development to ensure its release date was met. It had to sacrifice visual fidelity, mechanical depth, variety of gameplay, and online features to recreate this one scene. And they mostly pulled it off. But now, imagine this game being made today. Imagine if this game had the fidelity, budget, and development time of Max Payne 3. Imagine this game's levels and reactivity with modern tools. It would be insane. Unfortunately, Stranglehold isn't the product of an ideal world, but the desperation of a AAA company in its final days. And at the very least, what they produced is worth playing for the attention to detail alone. The humble developer trend of this video continues with a game by Artificial Mind in Movement, now Behavior. Leading up to September 2009, the company made Happy Feet, Drake and Josh, The Golden Compass, DS, Lord of the Rings Conquest, DS, Seen It Bright Lights Big Screen, and Wet. Yeah, I don't get it either. Whether this game's the product of a company going postal after years of movie license ports or a secret passion project brewing underneath the surface, there's no information to know. All that can be known is what the Quebec developer made: a Grindhouse cosplay. Now, Grindhouse is two things: a style of low-budget theater home to exploitation films, and a 2007 double feature by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino made as a tribute to them, with two exploitation films of their own, complete with sex and violence, damaged film reels, and fake intermissions.
Brought to you from your friends at the Weinstein Company.
Wet thankfully doesn't have that, but it's got almost everything else, and absolutely nails the Grindhouse aesthetic with the grainy filters, character designs, and portraits. As a concept art book, Wet succeeds with flying colors, but as an actual game, let's start with a nitpick. This is a stock sound effect that's been used for decades. It's heard in everything from American movies to open world games and hip-hop albums. This ubiquity makes it hard to take seriously, but typically games use it as a sidearm. Now, frankly, the audio in all these games aren't great, littered with pea shooters that sound more like somebody imitating a gun. But Wet goes above and beyond, not only using this sound for your primary weapon, it's the only to have decent range, high accuracy, and infinite ammo, with the most useful upgrades including an increased fire rate, meaning 90% of the game sounds like